Good evening, welcome to the Finance Board meeting for March 20th, 2024. We'll call the meeting to order at 5:05 p.m. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the February 28th, 2024 meeting. Is there a motion to accept?
Motion to accept.
So you got three people you could choose from. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, Martha second. Is there any discussion? No? All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Moving to the next item on the agenda, which is our big item of discussion for this evening, is the fiscal year 25 omnibus budget review. I know that Rebecca has spent a great deal of time trying to put together something for us based on the information that has been made available, based on the Pentucket Regional School District meeting last week and the assessment that came down for us. Rebecca, I don't know if you want to go through, if you've made any, have any additional information available. Or if we want to just kind of go through line by line and you can give us updates as we go through them.
It's up to you. I would suggest maybe if we do it, take it block by block,
Yep.
because each one has its own specific
Discussion, right, okay.
unless you want me to go over some of the main items in which were the driving factors of the budget and why decisions were made the way that they're being proposed.
That's probably a good idea as a starting point. Maybe we can just touch upon, like, from the revenue side, you know, where things look in terms of how much revenue we're able to bring in. And then we can go through and you can touch on the items that are kind of driving factors. And then we'll go through individual, departments.
That sounds great. So to start it off, as you can see up on the screen, I pulled up the revenue tab. That was also shared with the board in advance of this meeting. We have had conversations and past meetings about the current situation that we find ourselves in from a revenue perspective. As a municipality, we are only able to grow by 2.5%. So as you'll see on the first tab, the biggest revenue generator for the town is property taxes. So you'll see that we're looking to collect about $20,672,470 in the form of property taxes. That also includes the debt exclusion for the town, which is the fire truck and the 150 Center property. It also includes the debt exclusion for the Pentucket Regional School District for the middle high school. As you go down, you'll see local receipts. Local receipts are what we collect from different departments. So if you come to apply for a liquor license, if you pull a building permit, et cetera, et cetera. So that also includes motor vehicle excise taxes. As we discussed previously, we're not exactly expecting that to grow much given the economy and the way that people are buying cars. You'll see the pilot agreement that we have with both the Groveland Municipal Light Department as well as the Groveland Housing Authority out back. You'll see the charges for the cell tower. We own the cell tower out back at the Pines Recreational Area, and they provide income for that. You'll see again some of the other smaller department revenues that we discussed, whether it be the police, fire, selectmen, cemetery clerk, etc. There's also the investment income that you will see that we are able to generate from the investments that the treasurer collector is making. That brings us down to our, so that's about $1 million or $1.5 million that we're looking to generate from the local receipts section. Then we'll go down to the state aid. For state aid, we only have the numbers that were released most recently by the governor. So we're only looking at about a 3% increase over last year's unrestricted general aid. You'll also see that we are receiving monies for state-owned land and public libraries, elderly, and vets benefits. And we're looking to bring in about $1.2 million for state aid. And then below, you'll see other finance sources. So we are looking at collecting on bond premiums. So those are the additional monies that have been generated from the bond. We're looking at the light transfer for $40,000, which is standard and historically has been that amount. We're also looking at a transfer from other funds, and that's the monies that we have from the conservation fee receipt that offsets some of the expenditures in the Conservation Commission line item. And then we have the $85,000 from OPEB, which we take from our free cash allocation. And you'll also see a new category that was added is that the election reimbursement. So as you remember at the last meeting, when the town clerk was here, we discussed how with the unfunded mandates and early election, early voting, things of that nature, that there would be some expenses that would be reimbursable through the state. So those would be added to the revenue side to offset some of the monies that we would need to put forward on the expenditure side. We weren't able to get a final number. We had communicated with the clerk, so we are waiting for an updated figure. I believe she's checking in with the state and getting those numbers, but we had to put something in there so that we could generate our budget. So we did our best and we came up with $3,000. So that's a newer category that you'll see. That could change. But again, these are estimated revenues because revenues are never guaranteed until after the fact. Then below, so that brings us at about $141,000 in additional revenue. And then there's the other non-appropriated expenses, which is the allowances for abatement exemptions, the cherry sheet charges, and the direct expenses to the library. So overall, for fiscal year 2025, we're looking to bring in about $23,392,289. Does anybody have any questions about the revenue side?
I don't have any questions, but I think it's probably important to just point out, that 2.5% number that we're allowed to increase, just to point out that it's, $450,000. So what we're seeing and what we've seen the last 2 years are just certain categories of expenses that are taking a big chunk of that money right out from underneath us before we even get to being able to look at some of the areas and some of the things that we would love to be able to do, but we just don't have that ability to.
Very much so, and the fact that if you look, we are able to grow beyond the 2.5%, but that is new growth.
Right.
And new growth is the building that we see all around town, and we're only really looking to capture about $111,000 in addition to that 2.5. So you, as you mentioned, there's not exactly a lot of additional revenue being generated year to year that will help those expenses that you're discussing.
So then I guess we can, if no one has any questions on the revenue side, we can start going through the expense side, and having the discussions about each of the departments. And do we want to go through all of them and discuss? Do we want to go through and vote at the same, vote at the end? How do we want to?
We should probably,
Why don't you start on page 1 and go down and jump some
Okay.
spots. And then if there are any questions, then we will be learning.
All right, so then Rebecca, if we want to start going through, we can start with, the general government and start going through with the moderator as the first section.
That sounds good. So one of the things that in efforts to try, so one of my main goals was to make sure that we were providing 2.5% cost of living increases to all of our employees that were obviously not covered under a contractual a contract or that did not have the rights under a collective bargaining unit. So I had made great efforts to try and make sure that no matter what, every position received a 2.5% increase.
2%.
2% increase, too much 2.5. 2% increase over their last fiscal year for their salaries. In efforts to do so, obviously, there were other items that we needed to take from because there were other driving costs that were non-negotiable items that we could not reduce and that we were essentially obligated to pay. So as part of that, that actually led me to see that there could be some benefit in decreasing the stipends that we have available for some of our elected board members. So they may seem small in nature, $100 or $300 per member, but added together, It's about $10,500 that we could remove from the budget and allocate elsewhere. So in the first two sections, you'll see that the proposal is to eliminate the moderator stipends of $100, to eliminate the Board of Selectmen stipends of $7,500. So those are the first two items that would be eliminated. Moving down to the expenses under the Selectmen section, essentially, I reduced the reserve fund. The reserve fund is something that the Finance Board has available to them to do transfers as needed, and it's something that's usually unforeseen, but can come in handy because there are times when we'll need to make up for a shortfall or an estimate that we had for that fiscal year. So it was not an ideal place to take monies from, but because it is of a nature where it was as needed and not necessarily necessary all the time, and historically we have not had to utilize those funds, I felt as though that we could decrease that by $20,000 to add funds elsewhere in the budget. The other reduction that you'll see is in the town reports. So recently we moved over to using ClearGov for our town report, and we just approved the 2023 town report using ClearGov. It provides it in a website type platform, so you don't need to have, printed copies as much as you would for a regular assembly of an actual town report as we've historically done. We'll still print them because we need to have them available. We need to send them to the Secretary of State's office. We need them for historical records, et cetera, but we don't need to print as many, so that will eliminate that cost. So we cut $500 from that line item. So the total for the moderator would be $0, and the total for the selectmen with the wages and the expenses would be $45,700, which would be a reduction over last fiscal year. Moving down to the town administrator line items, or the town administrator budget, you'll see that I had proposed to, it jumps ahead a little bit, but I had put, at the last meeting over with the Board of Selectmen, there had been talks about the town planner and whether or not they wanted to fund the position moving forward. I personally have a town planning background, and I feel very confident that I would be able to pick up some of the responsibilities of a town planning role, as long as I had the administrative support and capacity to help me with project management and other items in my role. So further down, you'll see that I decreased the monies that were allocated for the town planner position and use those monies to fund the administrative assistant salary line item. So this would be a much higher level position that would allow for more deeper project management and help with financial management and other human resource related items. And then you'll see my salary.
That might not be reflected in the,
In this one.
if we're looking at the version that we received,
Yes, so that was the original draft
that-
decision.
but that is on your screen, that is a more current version than our draft that we're looking at.
Yes.
Okay, so what we should be looking at that to see that modification. Okay, thank you.
Sorry about that.
Yep.
I forgot which version.
Can you just maybe forward that to me so I can have it up at the same time?
I don't think there's many other changes other than that one line item, those two.
Or you can just give me a number and that way I can just plug it into this, and then when we go through and have a number to agree on.
Yes,
So
yes,
if you-
I can definitely send that over to you once we go through. And then you'll see my salary line item as negotiated with the Board of Selectmen, and then the expense line items have been level funded as they were in the prior fiscal year. Then you go to the town accountants.
Is there a way to shut that, some of these?
Oh, so then you'll go down to the town accountant's office department. So you have the town accountant salary with a 2% increase over last fiscal year, and then both of the expense line items remain level funded from fiscal year '24. You go down to the Board of Assessors. The Board of Assessors has their salary for the assessing manager at a 2% increase. The assessing board member stipends have been zeroed out, and then you'll see the only increases to the budget, is in the form of no, sorry, would be the increases that the department had requested for the reevaluation and maintenance that the assessor talked about when she came before you. We get reevaluated every 5 years. And so this year is a reevaluation year, so she needed to add monies into that account so that we could get the properties reevaluated for proper assessment. Otherwise, there were no other additional increases. Then you move to the treasurer collector. So we have the 2% increase over last fiscal year for the treasurer collector, a 2% increase for the, so you have the assistant treasurer collector salary with the $2,000 that we had discussed for this fiscal year that we were unable to add to the position, and then 2% on that particular salary. Then you'll have the expenses. The expenses are pretty much the same except for the tax title treasury was reduced by $1,000 from what was originally requested. Otherwise, the increases reflect what the department had requested. And then we'll move down to the town council. Town council line item has been decreased by $21,600. Technology was what was requested by the department, which was the $133,279. For the town clerks, we have the clerk salary level funded from last fiscal year, and then we have the assistant town clerk's wages with the additional $2,000 that was requested to go back into that salary, just like it was for the assistant treasurer collector, and then a 2% on top of that. So that's why that is larger, because those were items for wages that we had talked about previously. The poll workers had been increased. The town clerk had spoken to you about all of that, as well as some of the other lines in relation to the election expenses. So the election expenses went up to the $27,750. That incorporates the $3,000 that we added into the revenue side of things. And then moving down to the economic development, as we discussed in the earlier line items, we reduced the town planner's salary line item down to $10,000. That would be utilized for consulting services as needed for different projects that come up and things that would need further review. The conservation agent wage would be $15,000 and would be offset by not offset, but an additional $8,000 would be contributed to that by the fee receipt account from the Conservation Commission. Another decrease was to the planning expense line item. So we took $1,360 from their expense line item, and we removed the stipends for both the planning board and the Conservation Commission. From the municipal building side, we have the building facilities supervisor with a 2% increase. It looks like it's a reduction, but it's not. The rate that was agreed upon, it would be a 2% with that. The budget was just a little higher last fiscal year. And the only other decrease in that particular line was to utilities. It went from $156,450 that was requested down to $150,000. This was something that we had talked about specifically with the building and facility supervisor and the accountant, and running some analyses about the current utility usage and whether or not we would have a little bit of flexibility. We were able to lock in some of the rates, so we're hopeful that that will be okay. But obviously, as we said, none of these reductions are made willingly, if you will, or begrudgingly. Moving down to insurance, you'll see that the employee group health insurance, that's the GIC, they originally were giving us a 9 to an 11% projection for an increase over last fiscal year. They finally came in with an 8% increase, so you'll see that that number had dropped. But the other numbers have not changed from what was originally discussed. You'll go down to the police department, and you'll see that we are reducing the communications salary line item by $18,656. And we are increasing slightly the expense line item to $15,000. Some of that has to do with a grant that we received from a 911 grant that helps pay for some of the communications and the dispatch salaries that we have, so we had to make adjustments there. So you'll see that the budget for the police department has been decreased by 3,600.
So the grant covers some of the salary for
Correct.
the communications, and then that gives us money to give them for the other expenditures that
Correct.
I know
So
that,
we were utilizing the fund in its own salary, because it pays for salaries, it
Yeah.
needs to stay in salaries, so we needed to just correct the account to make sure that the expenditures stay in the expenditures and the salaries stay in the salaries, so that's why there's a little bit of a swap there.
okay, so it was there before, just not in the right bucket.
Exactly, and
Okay.
the total reduction in the budget itself was the 3,656. And then you'll see the fire department, and you'll see that we reduced the budget by $12,000. Specifically, you'll see that there was a request to add more monies into the per diem coverage line item. And so by doing so, some of the shifts were covered by those per diem hours. And so if we were to remove some of what was requested by the per diem hours, we would need to put them back into the on-call line item, because if there was a fire or an emergency, you wouldn't have somebody there to respond, you would need to call them back. So some of those monies went back, and the line item was reduced by 12,000.
Can I ask one clarification? So when you say the line item was reduced by 12,000, that's versus the proposed budget, but the department's overall budget increases by about $55,000, and that's to accommodate the other half of the new firefighter that was absorbed into the budget this year.
That is correct.
So overall, it went up, and then that was trimmed back to put it a little bit more.
That is correct,
manageable,
because
and
we were
okay.
only responsible last fiscal year for January to June for the full-time firefighters. This year. So next year, we will be fully responsible for their entire salary from July to June.
Therefore, accepting grants at a price.
They do. So then you move down to the building department, so we're looking at the building inspector having a 2% increase on his salary from last fiscal year, a 2% on the inspector's wage for both electrical and plumbing, and level funding both the expenses and the permit software as requested. For emergency management, you'll see that we're looking at a 2% increase over the director's stipends, and we're level funding the management expense. For public works, we did not have a tree warden stipends for the last few years, so that's a little confusing, so we're just continuing not to have the tree warden stipend. We're looking to decrease the tree warden expense line item from 20,000 in fiscal year 24 to 15,000. It was requested to come up to 25,000. One of the reasons that we felt a little more comfortable, or I felt a little more comfortable moving forward with that, is that the Groveland Municipal Light Department just recently purchased a forestry truck, and they're gonna be doing more tree work and efforts to clear out the power lines. And they also have been very helpful moving forward with some of our plans that we have for some tree removal. So we're hoping that maybe we'd be able to partner with them on some of those initiatives. So we're looking at adding a 2% over the superintendent's salary line item. We're looking at the highway salaries, which takes into consideration the recent collective bargaining agreement that was signed by the Board of Selectmen. And then we have some contractual items that were part of that. And then when we get into the expenses, the biggest removal is from the front end loader. $37,000 will be removed from that particular department budget. We did a lease to own for that piece of equipment. Now that we own the equipment, there's no need to have that money there, and we can use that elsewhere in the budget. Another reduction from the request, not necessarily from last fiscal year, was to level fund the road maintenance expenses. Not necessarily something else that we would like to see done, but with the fair apportionment monies that we're seeing come in addition to the Chapter 90 monies and the RAP monies, we feel as though we'll be able to continue to provide services as we are currently, but obviously that's still not enough, and we would like to do more. For the trash collection, we had, not last year, but the year before, combined the salary or the wages for the contract administrator with the Board of Health, since they were doing the Board of Health administrative assistant, since she was doing some of that work, and it was just made it a lot more clean and clear. So that's why it's zeroed out, but technically it had already moved 2 budget cycles. The contract expenses for the rubbish is $820,480. That takes into consideration the estimate that we're seeing for tonnage. We have run an analysis, and as you can see through the year-to-date column, that we are running on target for what we are estimating. So I'd be cautious to cut that or reduce that by any more. Then we move to the cemetery. We're looking at a 2% increase over the current salary for the cemetery supervisor. So that position is the public grounds and cemetery supervisor that we recently changed a little bit to go underneath the highway department and also take on some additional responsibility. So it does seem like there's a reduction in that line item, but there's not a reduction in what we're paying the individual. It's what we negotiated to pay the individual, so it'll be a 2% on that, but the salary line item was higher than that, so we're reducing that in order to use the monies more efficiently.
And just so people understand, that's like just the timing of the payroll, right? Because I'm assuming.
No, this is because the allocation for the position that during the budget, when we made the estimate, was higher. So we estimated that amount, not what we have remaining in the account.
Okay.
And then we're looking to do a little bit of consolidation in the expense line items for the cemetery department, because one of the reasons that we had wanted to move forward with this type of initiative is because we would be able to utilize resources more efficiently, having the highway department and the cemetery together, whether that be through machinery, whether or not that be through manpower, et cetera, et cetera. And we also moved the cemetery supervisor from the building up at the cemetery down to town hall, so he's no longer up in that office over there, so we don't necessarily need to pay as much in utilities and for other assets like, heating the building and things of that nature. So we reduced the utilities line item by $2,560. And then we get down to the education line items. So we're looking at a Whittier Tech assessment of $661,382. For the Essex Tech assessment, we're looking at an assessment estimate of $276,535. I'm a little more worried about the Essex Tech number than I am about the Whittier number, just because the Whittier number is a little bit more of a concrete number when it comes in. The Essex Tech is still very much an estimate. As you saw with this fiscal year, we were $30,000 short, so we'll need to make up for that with year-end transfers. It's very hard to estimate how many students are going to be accepted by Essex Tech, since it's specific to the student. It's not like we're a member community, so how many people are not able to get the agricultural classes that they are at Pentucket and Whittier will be able to go there. So it's a little bit harder to track down. So I'm okay with the number, but I am a little hesitant we might be slightly off.
So when would they get the?
So they said they'd have a better understanding with the letters that they sent, the acceptance letters that they send out in April.
Don't they know we all have town meetings approximately like around there? So why are we doing business with them?
So this is per student. So if the students can't get the program elsewhere, they can go to Essex Tech. We're not a member community. We don't have to pay
I
them.
know, because you're either veterinary tech or you shovel, stuff. All right, I'm not happy. Because they should know that most of our towns have town meetings in April and May, and they think it's okay that they can't give us a number. It says a lot. All right, enough.
And then we break out the Pentucket assessment into 2. So we have the Pentucket capital assessment, and that's at $2,224,874. And then we have the Pentucket base assessment, and we have that at $11,566,398. I know that the chair had asked that would be a 2% increase over the last assessment, the updated assessment number. So what we had budgeted for our fiscal year 24 was the $11,442,246. What the actual assessment was after a calculation error was found and Chapter 70 monies were adjusted back in September, October, was that it was 11,294,981. So there was a 1% change between that for fiscal year '24, and there was a 2% increase over last year's assessment. So for the educational side, like you had mentioned before, one of the larger budgetary items is 14,729,189 of our $23 million budget. So for human resources, we have a 2% increase over last fiscal year for the health nurse, a 2% increase over last fiscal year for the clerk, a 2% increase for the health and sanitation agent for over fiscal year '24, and the stipends for the health board has been removed. And then the expenses were as requested, which was just a $300 increase so that the health agent could go to further her certifications so that she could do her job more effectively. For the Council on Aging, we have the increase in 2% for the director's salary, a 2% over fiscal year '24 for the assistant director, a 2% for the outreach worker, and we have a 2% for the part-time van driver line item. And then we level funded and as requested for the expense and the vehicle line item. For the veterans, we have the veteran salary level funded, and then we have our veteran expenses. And then for the library, we have the director's salary with a 2%, and we have all library staff wages with a 2% increase, except for the fact that we removed $18,218 from the budget because they currently have a vacant staff assistant. It's a part-time library assistant position, so we're looking not to fill that position and still be able to provide a 2% for all the existing positions while also keeping the youth services librarian with a 2% increase to attract qualified candidates. We have a 2% increase over for the part-time wages, and then the only other reduction was to technology by about $300. And for debt services, we're looking at reducing what we had owed for the short-term bans. We were able to pay them off this fiscal year, so that was exciting. But we still have some obligations, so you'll see our debt services administration fees as well as what we're obligated to pay for our maturing principal and the interest on long-term debt. And then in our unclassified items, we have the standards, and then we have the Essex County retirement, which was the biggest increase in our budget of 27% to $911,780. So total expenditures would be $23,391,891, leaving us $398 in the black. So as we mentioned, the main goal was to at least provide all of our employees a 2% increase over last fiscal year, as well as honoring all of our contractual obligations. I did talk to all of the departments that saw a significant cut, those being the library, the police department, the fire department, the highway department, and then some of the other ones that were impacted, such as legal reserve. They're not really a department oriented, but in consultants with the accountant, none of the decisions, those items were taken, lightly. But we feel as though none of the operations and the services would be impacted to an extent where this budget would not be able to effectively provide the residents the services that they require. Mm-hmm.
The Pentucket budget, did they sharpen their pencils on that? Because it looks lower than what I've seen before.
I'm not sure what they did, but I know it came in 2% over what it was last fiscal year.
Well, they did something. Okay. 'Cause as you know, we had the superintendent and his business manager here, so good job.
I do know the school committee at their last meeting,
Yeah.
he walked through the various aspects that they were making changes and how they were going to account for the decrease that they put through.
So for education, we're still spending in the 65% plus,
Correct.
which leaves 35% for us.
Correct. Not considering trash, retirement, health insurance.
I think that trash thing's gonna have to change, like all the other towns around here. 2-barrel limit, 1-barrel limit. Because this is getting to be $1 million thing, and they use one guy. One guy picks up this whole town. He does a good job. But unfortunately, trash is the one that gets cut the most eventually. Danvers assessed each people that live in apartments and owned $200 plus on top of the trash pickup. That was a town manager decision. All right, enough of that. Trash is us.
Rebecca, can you just go back and go through the numbers for the change to the town planner and the admin?
And I just sent it to you, too.
Okay, thank you. I
That's
just
why
want
I
to,
shut off my screen or my email. So the only thing for that would be, like I had mentioned, because of the position that the board had taken and recognizing that some of the work that I could do internally myself under my area of expertise, I just need to expand that capacity. So it was $70,000 for the administrative assistant salary, and then it was a reduction for the town planner salary to $10,000 and a reduction in the conservation agent to $15,000.
Okay. Now what?
are we,
Plus.
I mean, I understand like this is your background as a town planner, but are we taking a step back by getting rid of that position? Because it is going to be so hard to get that position back in our books, just looking at the last couple of years.
I definitely think, I mean, I have some slight bias as a town planner coming from that background. I think that the role is extremely instrumental in bringing in monies. I mean, I started with the town back in 2018, and now that I've been here, I think we brought in over $4 million, and we have at least $2 million outstanding in grants that we could bring in. I mean, that's a huge component of what a town planner does. I think that, you know, in addition to having a large 40B development with 192 units, I think with, you know, having subdivisions that don't have adequate sidewalks, adequate roads, I think that when you talk about drainage and you talk about all these different things, you talk about businesses and trying to attract more revenue, that's not just households and, you know, commercial, industry, retail. A town planner is a multifaceted type of role that takes into consideration all those types of things. So I definitely think that it's important in any community to have a town planner, and I don't know many communities that don't have a town planner. I think the only one that, even in smaller communities, they at least have an admin that's been there for X amount of years that has the expertise to really kind of make sure that the functions of that role are carried through. But I also know that, you know, Merrimack doesn't have a town planner, and they rely on a consultant to help with some of their applications, et cetera, and other types of grant opportunities are missed. But I think that one of the benefits with Groveland is myself and knowing that I am very capable of applying for grants and doing the economic development initiatives that we have. And I think that if I'm able to get a qualified administrative coordinator who can help me facilitate projects on that level, I think that I would be able to take advantage of that and see exactly what the town wants to do moving forward, since there was such a debate as to whether or not we would want to move forward with the town planner position. So I think that there wouldn't be a loss with the given situation as long as we could find somebody that would be able to help me coordinate those efforts. But yes, I mean, in an ideal world where we have a budget and we have monies that we need to use, I don't believe that it would be something that we would want to move forward with. But given the sacrifices that other departments have to make and some of the priorities that have been put forward by the Board of Selectmen, I want to be mindful of that and their role, and make sure that we're making sure that we're impacting residents and other departments as least as we possibly can.
I know you're here all hours, so I don't want more falling to you. I don't want you to sacrifice yourself for other departments, and because your role as the town administrator is also just as important as a town planner. So I just want to make sure that by bringing in a admin coordinator, you feel that the duties are not going to be too much, because we heard Annie talk about being the town planner and the conservation agent. The role was just too much. So I just don't want to set us up to have that same situation.
I completely agree. But I do think that that's why the salary is higher on the administrative side, because I really do, I don't mind taking on I enjoy doing those types of things. That's why I got into the industry to begin with. But at the same time, I need to have somebody there that has that caliber of skill sets that will allow me to do what I need to do. And so I need that person to have the project management skills, not just answering the phones and greeting people at the door. I need somebody that has the ability to project manage and understand that there's multiple moving pieces and there's different things that are happening, and jump from one thing to another. We're talking about economic development, but then we're talking about liquor licenses, but we're talking about the field use, but we have to go through CPC, but then we have to figure out what the insurance renewal is, and then we have to figure out whether or not we have, the budget figured out. And there's just so I just need to, I think that I don't have a crystal ball, but I know that if I have somebody who would be able to pull all of those strings to help me do that, I think that we could get things accomplished. So, and I think that we could be successful at it, but it needs to be the right candidate. It's not just your typical admin. It's not basic level support. It does take it up a step further in order to be able to accomplish that. If it's not, then it won't be sustainable. It won't be effective, and it would become more burdensome, and things would be falling through the cracks.
Just want to make sure. Does anyone else have any questions? Go ahead.
So it's very admirable that you're willing to fall on the sword for some of these things. But I worry, how much of your real responsibilities is that going to take away from? I know you're a tremendous town planner. It was obvious the first time you came in, and the amount of money you've brought into this town over the time you've been here. I just worry, as Melissa stated, that we're going to burn you out. And in the long run, we're going to lose two great assets, a great town planner and a great town administrator. And then where are we? We're further behind than we are today. And this whole theory rests on you being able to find that one individual that's going to be that fit, right? If we can't find that one individual that fits into that hole or that square perfectly, the whole thing's going to kind of fall apart.
It could be the case. I mean, I'm trying to be mindful of what's being requested and trying to enhance capacity. And I think that if I'm able to enhance my capacity and establish a clear foundation, even if the individual needs a little bit of assistance to get situated and helping me gather that type of foundation, that it would be better than where it is now, where there's no support. And I'm still being pulled in 18 million directions, and I'm still involved with the affordable housing stuff. I'm still involved with all of the grants to application standpoints. I'm still doing a lot of the administrative function that already interferes with my ability to do other things. And that's the understandable. I'm in a community of Groveland, and we're restricted, and I fully take on that responsibility. So I understand that everything is done, everything, comes with a sacrifice. But I still believe that enhancing my capacity in order to juggle all of that is far more important, if that means that we're able to keep us moving forward, if that makes sense. I don't.
It does. Just a reminder that even the greatest jugglers in the world can only hold so many objects at one time before. And you're juggling chainsaws that are running most of the time, and they're not balls, right? One more question. I noticed that a lot of the stipends were zeroed out, but some weren't. Can you tell me?
They should all be zeroed out.
There was some
Did
that
you just
weren't.
find money for us,
There was,
Bill?
I think there was one that wasn't,
Yeah,
under police, I think it was.
Oh, for
But that, is that a,
police, it's,
or fire, somebody,
No, it's the,
I did see it.
Emergency management
Emergency.
directors.
oh, yeah.
oh, so the
called a
emergency
stipend.
management, that's the stipends that we can't, that's we have an officer who takes on the emergency management responsibilities, and that's paid to his salary. So it's not your board member stipend that we would be able to take away.
So is that more contractual then?
I don't, so it's not in their union contract, but
It's
in
an
order for him,
It's an
he's an employee.
versus a board member. The others were all board members. This is an employee.
Okay.
So he gets paid extra. He gets paid that stipends over the course of the year to take on emergency management responsibilities, which comes with a comprehensive emergency management plan, attending the proper training. So if we need backup generators, there's flooding, there's a big snowstorm, like power outages, any type of like natural, like emergency type of situation, any type of MEMA monies, the Massachusetts Emergency Management Association, or FEMA monies, the Federal Emergency Management Association, all of that gets filtered through that particular role. So it is in addition to his duties as a police officer here in Groveland.
That's Steve still, right?
Yes, Officer Sergeant, yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. I don't know what else do you say? I mean, this is horrific, really. I mean, this is slashed to the bone.
It is. I would just comment that, I hate to see our reserve fund get cut from 30,000 to 20,000. We've been hoping to increase it over time. It gives us choices, it gives us flexibility, we've rarely used it, but we have had to use it in the past. But as importantly, that falls to free cash at the end of the year, and it's one of the ways, if it's not spent, it can build up our free cash. Our legal fund, we cut 20,000 out of the legal fund. I think that our employees have worked really hard to not access legal when we don't have to. And so that's been really kept in check. And as a result, that's getting cut as well. So I just think that this budget represents a lot of sacrifices across the organization, across the whole town. No one was really not affected by the hard decisions that were made. And I know the school had to make a lot of cuts. I know the school had to make a lot of hard decisions, as did we. And, as Melissa pointed out at the very beginning, if the 2.5% increase is $450,000 and our new growth was estimated to be just over 100, it gives us just over $500,000 for new additions to the budget. And 200,000 of that went to the Essex County Retirement. Close to 100 was trash, right? And then you have a couple other,
Insurance.
absorb the insurance, we absorbed the other half of the firefighter contract, and then that's it. It's spent, it's gone. It's remarkable. I know it seems like there's $20 million, and that seems like a lot of money. The bare bone obligations that we have are substantial, and I think everybody took cuts along the way. And even the shift to potentially the administrative assistant, that's not a new position, that's a shift of an existing position, a accommodating. So hard choices, hard times, and I think that we're going to continue to have hard conversations well in advance of budget planning for next year. We've talked a lot about wanting to follow up with Essex County Retirement. How can this be a 20-25% increase? How can a community that increases their taxes by 2.5% absorb a 20-25% increase in any large line item? What is their expectation for next year? How can we get our heads around that? Like Jim says, probably gonna look at trash options that we have
That's a
there.
no-brainer.
we need to continue to look at where we can make strategic choices and hard decisions, and that we don't make cuts lightly. It's not been fun.
Well, 2 weeks ago, we were in part 2.5 area, so there's been a large improvement over that. And the school was up around anywhere between 4 and 8%. It's not easy, and I know you out there in the audience are here to protect your departments and people. I really appreciate that. But,
Go ahead, Laura.
No worst case scenarios.
I'd say this is the worst case scenario.
Oh.
This is it. You're looking at
Like,
it.
I think obviously unless there's a revenue shift that we're not expecting, this is how we've been able to get the most we can with as little impact on all of the departments across the board, rather than, you know, what we were talking about before. If the school had come in significantly higher, where would we be cutting services maybe altogether? I think that's kind of like the conversation that we get scared about. And I know I watched the school committee meeting, and I know, you know, I did extend an invitation again to the school committee to come and to hear, because there were some comments in their meeting that made me kind of stop in my track, where they started talking about, well, where'd the override money go? Why is it being shifted to other departments when that's not the case? We're not shifting money from the previous school budget to any other department, where, you know, our approach to the school was like, this is what we have, and we all have to try to work together to find that balance. You know, and I know they're not happy with the cuts that they have. I also serve on the school council at the Bagnell. There's, you know, parents are not happy with what they're hearing. And the school committee members are not happy with what they're hearing. You know, but again, it's not one department just running with all this money, and it's every department getting a piece of what we
A
what
smaller
we
piece
have.
of the pie is more exact.
Can I add something? So just a couple questions on my part. So Alyssa Lee, Director of the Council on Aging, also Groveland resident. Not with my director hat on. Rebecca, in any individual, when you say expanding your capacity, again, absolutely humble and admirable, but you still only have so many hours of the day. So thinking in my background as HR, I think you're spot on, and I just want to say that. Not that you can't do it, however, you really do have to look at the role and not the person doing it, because if and really when Rebecca leaves to go on to bigger things, you're not going to be able to fill that same exact role as you mentioned. So just putting it out there, not that you can't do it, but what's it going to look like in the future? Well, then don't worry about it. I don't know, I just couldn't see. Could you remind me what the assistant director's salary is for the COA?
So we have budgeted for fiscal year '24, $57,393.28. It was requested to be increased to $67,000. A 2% increase on fiscal year '24's number would bring us to $58,541.85.
Okay. So, again, appreciate the 2% increases to the salaries of the COA. I think feedback on the process, it would be incredibly helpful for directors, for leading a team as a leader, to be able to follow through on the transparency and visibility that we hear so much about. But I was left with zero answers to the questions I posed about timeline. So my staff, as well as many other staff members, were worst case scenarios happening tonight. So yeah, it is uplifting to come here and see that it's not, but can you imagine, right? These are staff members thinking, because we haven't heard any answers, going through their mind about what, I'm losing my job, what am I going to do? And not that we all can't plan, and we do need to plan for worst case scenario, but when you don't answer somebody's emails or come down to the office, it is really, really hard to be a good leader and a good member of the team when we can't look up to the leaders ahead of us to give us that transparency and visibility that you ask. So I would kindly and respectfully ask, even if you don't have answers, then say that. Say, I don't know the answer right now. But just to leave me and my team hanging for worst case scenario, it wasn't kind. I'll put it that way. It wasn't kind. Secondly, for the assistant for Rebecca, absolutely, clearly, no doubt that that role is needed. I will go back to what we stated in our initial budget request for the $67,000 for the assistant director, who has been here for 20 years. 20 years as of June. An assistant director is getting paid less than somebody new coming in potentially to be an assistant coordinator. And that, again, just does not fit in what we hear so much about having transparency and visibility and into these guidelines of what the team and as a town hall can expect. So I would ask you to really look into that, because it's, as I think we're quoted, we need to be fair. Yeah, we also need to be equitable. And 20 years tenure for an assistant director absolutely needs to be paid accordingly.
Rebecca, I mean, the title administrative coordinator, but it does not sound like it's just some admin scheduling meetings, and, she's basically going to be running as an assistant town administrator, assistant town planner, filling in, and that's how I took it from the conversation. And then again, this is the first I've heard of this change in the deviation of the budget from what we were presented with, so.
If we want to leave it as a town planner and have a separate town planner, we can certainly do so. It seemed like the direction of the board was to move in a different direction, so I was just trying to make sure that we were doing that accordingly. But yes, it would not be your standard pick up the phone, direct resources, et cetera, et cetera. It would be far more complex, and we would require somebody to have the expertise in order to move forward with that type of position. But if the board so chooses that they would like to do that, then they are more than welcome to do so, as well as the board of selectmen is more than welcome to eliminate the town planner in its entirety. These are just the suggestions that I'm putting before the board and trying to maximize the resources and be fair about the adequate operation of each individual department as they have historically grown and how the priorities have shifted. But it really is entirely up to the finance board and the board of selectmen and ultimately the voters on how they want to proceed. And I'm not here to tell them what the best answer is. I'm just here to make my recommendation, and my recommendation was to make sure that we were utilizing the personnel in the best way possible. And that was the solution that I came up with that I thought was fair and equitable.
Anyone else have anything?
Let's move it.
Do we want to go through and vote line item by heading? We don't have to go each line item.
We can do that.
Rebecca, when was that When was that decision made by the board? Was it just last week, Monday? To
For-
eliminate the town planner and kind of shift those
So
responsibilities?
they voted not to fill the position. So since they're not filling the position, that would mean that ultimately we wouldn't have a town planner. And even if they approve the expense line item, then they wouldn't fill the role. And if they don't fill the role, then I would be required, well, sorry, not required, but I feel I would be obligated to make sure that our MBTA zoning and our 40B development and all of our other types of projects that we have before us would be managed, and so I would be taking on those responsibilities. So, to be fair, if they did not want to see those, I wanted to still make sure that the community had the representation that they required, so that's, again, the reason why I put forward my request. But yes, it hasn't been eliminated, they just didn't want to fill the position. So they don't plan on filling the position.
They had a
So are
candidate.
we being
There was a candidate.
penny wise
that-
and pound foolish? I mean, in the long run, are we, biting our nose off to spite our face? This, for today, I guess that works, but what's it, 6 o'clock now? Today's almost over.
That's not a question for us, and it's not a question for Rebecca. That's a question for the Board of Selectmen, based on the decision that they made recently.
Maybe we can get.
Well, I'm just trying to figure out if this was like forced upon her, this wasn't her decision to shift all these, shells around in a way that you presented it now. But this was more of their decision, so you had to react to that decision and shift all this stuff? Do I have
Just-
that more?
To some extent, but not entirely. I mean, I think that it's been known for a while that there's been a capacity issue within my office and being able to accommodate for such, and I think that it's gotten to a point where that support is really important. And so I think that there's a lot of different hats that I wear personally, and that was the type of proposal that was put forward. So I don't think it's the driving factor, but it definitely is a reason for it to be discussed in the first place. But what happens after the fact, I'm not sure. But it's definitely not the only reason, but we would have never thought of it if it didn't go that way.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot, and I'm not trying to pin any responsibility or blame on you for any of it. I mean, this is the card you were dealt. You did a fantastic job, pulling us through with a full house. But, the difficulty is, I worry about you more than some of the stuff.
Well, I think when we started out this budget process, I personally said one of my priorities for this year was to get some level of some level of support to the town administrator's
Some help.
office. It exists every other community.
And we had an admin assistant.
There was an admin previously.
Previously.
Other departments have support. Other departments have assistance. Other departments have help. Everybody has help. And we have a town administrator that's been really potentially burning herself out, giving her all to our town, to our town hall, our community. And we appreciate that, but my priority was, we really need to get some layer of support in there. And it was requested in the budget, and then initially. And then I think, maybe with the Board of Selectmen making a decision saying that they do not want that town planner role, then, it makes sense to me to make more of a partner, more of a robust assistant in that department that can absorb some of that, because it's going to fall back onto the town administrator. So I think it's an alternative.
It's absolutely an alternative. I'm just worried in the long run, to her point and my point earlier, if Rebecca decides to leave or has a nervous breakdown tomorrow, where do we find a person that can fly an F-15 and also pilot a submarine at the same time? Because the job description now that she's going to have after this is going to be so unique as maybe.
But there may be a little bit more overlap specific to her office, which gives us a little more continuity, a little more depth than being completely separate to the planner.
I'm hoping. Yeah, I'm hoping.
What we don't want to happen is for the planner role to not get filled and have the administrative role not
Not
be
get
funded
filled.
and have no help, period. That's not good for Rebecca and that's not good for our town because who do we ask to take on that role?
I agree, she's needed the help for
So-
the longest time.
So I think some level of support creates that depth that is needed, whether it's in one role or the other. I feel like this is one, because like she said, the planning role is going to fall back. So create the level of support that we can. Or at least budget for it and see what we can do with it.
We need the budget for it. I don't care who knows what, we need the budget
We need the
for it to
budget
take
for
the
it.
challenge, okay?
Yep.
So, we could ask a million questions. When has this town been consistent year to year? None. So,
Can you hear me? There we go. When we had our department meeting, but again, I wasn't here for it, but for that Collins study report where the vast majority are connected to the table in there, whether it was officially implemented or not, the facts are there on the salaries. So why is that not being used to categorize for an assistant, for the town planner, for the assistant director of the COA? I mean, you created that document for a reason.
Do you want to talk a little bit
It's
about?
the same
how
reason
that
that
was
the
implemented?
federal government mandates certain things and passes them down to the state, and the state passes them down to the municipalities, but doesn't provide a funding source to execute those mandates. We've got a nice study, we just don't have all the money we need all at once to execute it 100%.
I think the fact of the matter is also, we did use ARPA funds that we finally had. We had a funding source to create the study. We needed the study, we paid for the study. We used the study to support information back to the residents to come up with more money. We asked the residents to pay another $250,000. That was a big ask because I've been on this board for, 7 or 8 years, and I've heard the same conversations, the same requests, the same issues. And we hear it loud and clear, but we need to make steps as we can, when we can. So when we had the opportunity to fund a study, we did. When we had an opportunity to put that forward in a well-qualified, well-informed piece of information to the residents, we did. And it passed, and it barely passed. But I feel really, in fact, proud of this community, of this board, and the Board of Selectmen, that we were able to finally harness that information and make big, big steps for a large number of our employees that really were behind in the pay scale. They really were. And we did it. And so no, that's not true. That's not true. I think that's an interpretation. That might be how it's been perceived by some people, but there was, and our town accountant can, I hope, speak to how it was implemented. But it was implemented fairly. We are a town who lives with decisions that we've been making for years. The town voted no marijuana. We don't have that income that our surrounding communities do. We have a lot of differences that make Groveland Groveland. They make Groveland who we are. It also means that we don't have exactly the same revenue base that a lot of our peers do. So when we took a study and we took averages and we took what we could ask of the taxpayers, we took every single free dime that we had and stretched it, we said, okay, so maybe we really can't maybe we really can't hit exactly the mean because of who we are. But what we're going to do is we're going to get everybody as close to that mean as we can, and we're going to allocate according to a formula that's fair and equitable to every employee. That's what was implemented. If it's not perceived that way, then I'm going to ask our town accountant to talk specifically as to how it was implemented, if you have more specific questions. But I followed up on that as well. That's my understanding of it. And you can see, based on this budget, that we've cut every single dime that we have to. That funds are scarce. They're limited. There's a lot of asks that we don't have control over. But we did put forth a large salary increase last year to employees that deserved it and needed it. That was a big step.
Okay, so you need to define that. I keep hearing this word equitable and tenure.
Then-
And when the majority of people here in town hall have not been here for the length, for the tenure of our assistant director.
So would the Council on Aging be willing to pay more of the $8,000 from their revolving account, as that would be less than what they were contributing before, in order to make up the difference for the salary?
Well, I would flip it back to you. As you said earlier, that it's very important that the town fully pay and put the resources into their staff and not be reliant on grant funding, because it is unstable. So we're just asking for the same. And just really an explanation, you know, I hear your words, absolutely, but again, just looking at the facts, and I will go through line by line if we need to for next, you know, meeting, about who is in that, you know, Collins study report, and that's just the basis that we have, right? And versus who is on this list and who's in that range. And I think, you know, there's a couple of people with huge discrepancies, including the assistant director. And I think one of the big reasons, sort of looping back to we just want a firm, concrete, factual answer. When somebody doesn't get a promotion, if you're at a corporation, which most of you probably are, there's a reason why you didn't get that promotion, because you didn't meet X, Y, and Z goal. We're just asking for the facts about why.
But sometimes the reality of the real world is you don't know why you didn't get that promotion. And that's
No,
what makes
I don't.
No, in many cases, you don't know why you got the promotion. You didn't get the promotion. You were passed off by somebody's brother-in-law or
Well, then those
relative
are
or
poor
something. But
HR
no, please. That's the reality of the world. I don't know what world you live in, but the reality that I've experienced is you don't always get the promotion that you deserve.
So she's
Sometimes
not
it goes to
getting the
someone else.
promotion.
But the fact is, because we live in the greatest country that it was ever devised on the face of the earth, we have the option to leave that company and go join another one, to seek a better future or a better promotion or a better life. Nobody has ever put a gun to my head and said, you need to stay here for the rest of your life, or 10 years, 20 years, or whatever. Regardless of how many times we pass you up for promotions, salary increases, premium parking spots, I just don't know what to say about that.
So,
It's
well,
just not-
bottom line for me as the leader that I want to be, as an advocate that I want to be and live by my goals and my values, is that I would like to have concrete information about why our assistant director is not paid, near such a large discrepancy from the Collins study as opposed to the majority of town hall staff. That's it. That's just
And I agree. We all want concrete answers to all the questions we have in life.
And
The
finance is
simple
able to
answer
do
is,
it.
sometimes the concrete answers to all the questions in life don't exist.
All right.
Or
Well,
we
I'm
have
just
to wait.
asking about salary, so good thing it's not a life question.
That's just
As
another
far
one.
as the Collins Center study, just because.
Yeah, go ahead, Alan, and I think this can wrap up the conversation.
Nobody got the number that was on the original sheet. We didn't have enough money to give that number. So what we did was we said, okay, everybody getting what it says on the sheet, and that sheet was determined by the Collins Center. We had to, as employees, fill out how many years we've been here, what we're doing. So all of that was taken into consideration. that's my understanding. So say it was, and these aren't the exact numbers, and I will pull the exact numbers and go over them with both of you or your board, or I'm happy to do that. It was say, was gonna cost 500,000, we had 400,000. So we just took the $100,000 difference, got that as a percentage, took the number from the column, and applied that percentage down the line to every single position to keep it as even as we possibly could. And that is what everybody got. So if you're trying to take the original sheet, it's never going to match, and it's not going to match for anyone. Everyone got the same, but that was extremely important to us. I sat there and helped with that calculation. We tried to, we didn't try to, we made it unbiased. We went by the study, reduced it by the percent change across the board. We didn't pluck out positions. So of the two positions, I know one of them, I don't know who the other one is. I'm happy to go over those numbers, and if there's an error, I want to know about it. But that's my understanding of that.
Thank you, Ellen. All right, so I think we can go ahead and start going through. Do we want to go through by department, which is how we've historically done it? Do we want to, it's probably the most appropriate way?
Sure.
Whatever way you feel fit.
Okay, this takes a while. So we'll need someone to make the motion and then someone to second.
And why don't you make it the same person if anybody is up to that, so that we'll. You don't have to, you can do whatever you want.
I mark you on tag team this.
I was just kidding. You guys can make whatever motions you want.
It is easier for the
I'll watch the play,
minutes.
I'll watch the
Easier for the
playback for
minute
my
taker,
minutes.
for sure. She can just copy and paste.
Okay, so let me just pull the spreadsheet back up. So I have Rebecca's numbers in here now too.
You're gonna do it by like general government?
Do you want me to do it that way? Do you want me to break it down into like moderator, selectmen?
Why don't you do
Oh.
it by general government and
Yeah.
then,
You want to go the higher?
We have to go.
and if anybody wants to
Break
break
it down.
anything down,
Okay.
then we can motion that. Does that seem
That's fair.
reasonable?
Correct. Okay. So then, I don't have a, are we going to tag team and have the same person do each?
I don't care, do whatever you want.
Sure.
Yeah,
See what
sure,
happens.
make it easier on,
Okay. Just because I have Rebecca's spreadsheet in front of me, I can go through and do that if anyone doesn't object, and then I can just point out where the changes were from the spreadsheet you're looking at.
shoot.
Okay. All right, so, and Rebecca, correct me if I say the wrong thing. Where'd it go? Window, this one. So, not scrolling up, okay. So for the first one, total general government, we have, I will make the motion for $2,351,045.90.
Is that with the
That
Rebecca adjustment?
includes the $70,000 for the administrative coordinator. And that reduces the town planner to 10,000 and changes the conservation agent to 15,000.
But it doesn't change the bottom line. Did it?
The bottom line changes, there's, I think, one other small change somewhere, so we actually
Okay.
have a different bottom line. $2,351,045.90. I made the motion. Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
Okay, any other discussion on that? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous.
I think in favor is kind of a
Well.
Normal, yeah. Nobody's
In favor
that.
of the motion, we'll put it that way.
Will you say that number one more time? 2
Two
million?
million, $351,045.90.
045.90. 2,051,045.
And then the next one is total public safety. The number is $2,396,104.76. That is no change from the original budget.
$2,396,104.76.
Correct. 2,396,104.76. There's the motion. There's a second.
I'll second that motion.
Mark, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. The next section is for Public Works. And the total, I'll make the motion for $1,847,696.47, which is no change.
$1,847,696.47.
Correct. Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. The next line item is total education. I'll make the motion for $14,729,189.20.
I'll second the motion.
$14,729,189.20.
Correct. Motion and a second. Any discussion? Yes, Bill?
Just for a point of record, in
Yes.
case anybody wants to do math, that doesn't want to do math, that represents a little over 63%
Yep.
of the total budget. Anybody doing the reverse math, that leaves us with approximately 37.5 cents on every dollar raised to pay for everything else we support in this town.
Right.
Think about that. It's not a lot of money.
All right, motion, second. Any other discussion? No. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous. The next line item is total human services. I will make the motion for $337,149.89.
$337,149.89.
89 cents, correct. No change from the budget that was distributed.
I'll second the motion.
Any discussion? No. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous. The next line item is for the library. I will make the motion for $344,312 even.
$344,312.
$344,312. Yes.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, first motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. The next line item is for the total debt service. Make the motion for $303,363 even.
$303,363.
Yes. 303363.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
The next one is for the total unclassified. I will make the motion. It is $1,083,030. So 1083030. There's the motion. Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, unanimous. That brings the total expenditures to 23,391,891.22.
I'm sorry, will you say that again?
Yeah, 23,391,891.22.
$23,391,891.22.
Correct. There's the motion. Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
So when you compare that expenditure to your revenues of $23,392,289.77, we have $398.55 left over as our cushion.
Let's have a party. Oh, believe me. I'm just not used to seeing these kind of numbers.
All right, so that closes out that agenda item. The next item on the agenda, Rebecca, I don't know if you have any other updates you'd like to provide tonight, or if we would like to.
So we can go through the water and sewer budget as well, if you'd like to do that. I don't have them on our sheet.
They're part of the warrant, right?
They are, so we can do them
We
that
can do
way, if
that.
that makes sense.
Next week, yeah.
Can you talk
Other
about the
than-
grant for the
The
I was
water.
gonna say, other than the fact that they just recently received a grant of
Mike.
$959,000. So we're very excited for them to receive this monies. I know that Congressman Seth Moulton will be joining us sometime in late March to come visit Groveland and hear more about our priorities, and also congratulate us on helping us receive the funding. So we're really excited, and we'll keep you updated and let you know what we get.
Congratulations.
That's awesome. Out of curiosity, is there a plan? Would,
So we requested a lot more. Naturally, we did not get it. So we put three projects forward, including a water treatment facility for $21 million. You know, you gotta ask for it all. And so, all of the projects together, and excluding even that one, it far exceeds what we were awarded. So, the water and sewer board met the other day to figure out exactly what capital projects they would be able to move forward with. It looks like it might be a combination, or it might shift slightly just because they don't have enough money to do the whole project.
Right.
So they have a designated area that they're looking at, and so they're gonna be meeting again to finalize those details.
that's awesome. Thanks.
That's good. Thank you for your hard work.
It was a group effort for sure.
Yes, certain it was.
And congratulations, that's exciting.
Thank you.
Okay, so the next thing on the agenda is for our next meeting, which we had set for next Wednesday, the 27th at 5 PM. And the primary purpose of that meeting is to go through the warrant articles, because we suspect the warrant will be closed on Monday.
So I'm gonna be asking the Board of Selectmen to close the warrant, not necessarily on Monday, but to give us a little wiggle room to finalize all the details, but I'm hoping to ask them if they would vote to close the warrant, on that Friday, so March 29th, just so that we have time to make sure that everything was done. I know that there were 2 citizens petitions that we've received that will be before the Board of Selectmen on, the 5th. They don't necessarily have to vote them because they're citizens petitions, so they're automatically on the warrant. One of which was to change Board of Selectmen to Select Board, and the other change was to eliminate CPC. So those are both being reviewed by council currently and will be on the board's agenda for Monday. But again, not sure if there's any outstanding items, so I just want to make sure we give some people some notice. So hopefully they'll close the warrant on March 29th.
Okay.
But they would
But
be the
we
ones to.
suspect the majority of the articles will be,
All of our articles that are already drafted are pretty much finalized. We have a couple of outstanding items with the town council in terms of language and wording, specifically trying to figure out the sale of building proceeds and how that kind of gets factored in with the interest rate that is applied to the account and how we can make sure we capitalize on all those funds, eliminating the need for additional free cash. So yes, they are drafted, pretty much final. So I will definitely have articles for you to review almost in its entirety on that date.
okay, perfect, great. No one has any issues with that date, correct?
What's that?
Next Wednesday, 5
As far
o'clock?
as I know.
Okay. Perfect.
That should wrap it up, right? Next Wednesday.
I
That's the
wake
fun
up,
one, Mark. You'll like
Unless you
that
did a
one.
big surprise.
Do the whole warrant?
Yes.
That's the plan, is for hopefully for us, next Wednesday, we'll close out minus the finance board book, which we can talk about.
Oh, we're talking about that.
So then the next item is just if anyone has anything that was not anticipated at the time of posting. I do not have anything. Bill, do you have anything?
No, no, no.
Okay, Mark, good. Ruth?
Nope.
Jim?
Well said.
Okay, then that closes out our meeting. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn at 6:36 PM.
Is there a second? All right, all in favor? All right, unanimous. Thank you, everyone.